All right, as you well know, cities all throughout the world had tightened security today after a former Hamas leader called for a worldwide day of jihad. And we know of at least one episode of violence. There was a school teacher in France that was murdered by stabbing, and reportedly the man was shouting Allah Akbar during the attack. But closer to home, U.S. authorities in border states are continuing to sound the alarm that the Biden administration's mishandling of our border control has left our own country exposed to potential infiltration by terrorists. So the question begs itself, are we inviting trouble into our country rather than repelling it? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Pinal County, Arizona Sheriff Mark Lamb. Sheriff Lamb, thank you for all you do. Welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Jody. It's good to see you.
Great to see you again as well. All right, listen, we've got heightened security all throughout the country, all throughout the world for that matter today in response to the day of Jihad today. How did your department handle and approach today?
Well, out in Arizona, the day's not over yet, but we had our SWAT guys active. We broke it up into two different branches of our SWAT. That way we could cover all the county. We're the size of the state of Connecticut out here in Arizona, so we have a lot of cities within our county, and our guys did the best they could to prepare. We made sure that we were full staffed, and we've been fortunate enough to have no incidences. I talked to some guys down in Phoenix, likewise, at least with the troopers. They hadn't seen anything, so we've been blessed. But part of that is because all across this country, I think a lot of agencies were prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, we all thank God that there have not been any instances here to this point in the United States. And what a blessing it is to have leadership like yours and so many of our law enforcement across this country. Let me just be frank with you, Sheriff. The Biden administration has failed, particularly states like yours, in the way that it's mishandled the border crisis. And I know you have been very vocal in talking about this, but when you bring into the equation what happened last week in the horrific attacks in Israel, how does that highlight and magnify, underscore the importance of securing our own southern border?
Well, I've been saying for a while, Jody, that this is the greatest national security threat to America. The national government would like you to think that we've got problems all over the world that we need to go and fix for other people. The reality is the greatest threat to America is happening right at our southern border. And I've been screaming about it since this administration took over. And I've really been screaming about it over the last probably 8 months. Just because of the amount of military-age men that have been coming into this country from all over the world, especially from special interest countries, Middle Eastern countries, Russia, China, Mauritania, and Western Africa. These are places that we should be very concerned with, and these are military-age men coming in. And when I go to talk about this being the greatest national security threat, look no further than the fact that there has been over 100,000 American civilians that have died every year, last year, to fentanyl poisoning. So between the fentanyl poisonings coming across, between the unknown quantities of people that we were letting in, the terrorists, the criminals that have come across with these open border policies under this administration, this is our greatest threat. And last week, what we saw in Israel exposed just how vulnerable we are.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I believe it was the last time that I was at the border, in fact, in your county. I believe it was that there were, the day before, there were 6 that were arrested from some Middle Eastern countries. And, now we have the federal government admitting that we have had hundreds of terrorists come into our country. How concerned are you specifically on this issue? I know we've got the fentanyl, we've got the cartels, we've got the human trafficking, all these horrific things happening and coming across our border. But in light of today's call for a global day of jihad, how concerned are you that we now have potentially how many terror cell groups in our own country that have been virtually free just to come across our borders?
I'm very concerned. You know, you've had 7,000 Mauritanians. If you don't know where Mauritania is, Western Africa below Morocco, has become one of the leading breeding grounds for Al-Qaeda. You've got Director Wray admitting that they have untold amounts of Russian spies that have come into this, or Russian spies that have come to this country. There's been over 3,900 of them that came through the southern border at the Yuma sector. You've had 30,000 plus Chinese nationals that have come in. You've got untold amounts of people from all sorts of different countries, including hundreds that have come from places like Egypt, Lebanon, all of these different places, Middle Eastern countries, Afghanistan, Iraq. They're coming in from all over. And so, yes, I'm very concerned because I talked to the Border Patrol maybe a month or 2 months ago. And at the time, they said because of the amount of people coming in, they were only able to vet about 5% of the people coming from special interest countries. So a lot of those countries I just mentioned, they're only vetting 5%, which means that 95% of them, we have no idea who they are or whether they present a national security threat to us. And that should be very alarming to every American.
It should. It should send chills up the spine of everyone. A scale of 1 to 10, how vulnerable has Biden's immigration policy left the United States?
Well, I think we're at a 10. I really do. I think the amount of people we've allowed to come into this country is staggering. And I think it's a ticking time bomb, unfortunately. The one thing that we have going for us is the fact that we have the Second Amendment in this country. Our ability to protect ourselves and our homes and our communities, I think, is important. The other thing is the strength of the rule of law in this country. We have a very strong rule of law, although this administration, along with the Biden and Obama administration from years ago, have done everything they can to undermine and weaken the rule of law. And now we're seeing elected DAs and officials across this country that continue to weaken the rule of law. The rule of law has been what's kept the wolf outside the front door. We've let them in here now, and I'm very concerned with what kind of potential risk we've put ourselves in. I'm not a fear monger. I'm not trying to sound the alarm that you should live your day every day in fear. But to say that we haven't let these folks in and that we shouldn't be worried would be completely naive.
Sheriff, we got to end it right there. Pinal County, Arizona Sheriff Mark Lamb, thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch.